This is a tough day for Australia, a very tough day. Almost 600,000 jobs has been lost.
It's the steepest monthly rise on record.
325,000 of those were women. The youth unemployment rate has risen to 13.8%, up from 11.5%.
We can brace ourselves and must brace ourselves for further hard news for Australians to take.
Each state and territory recorded a rise in unemployment, and while the national rate has actually come in lower than expected, it's still predicted to get as high as 10%.
But for the JobKeeper program, it would be 15%, and that's really important to understand.
Which is true. Right now, more than 6 million Aussies working for more than 860,000 businesses are benefiting from the JobKeeper scheme, so they're not included in the figures. But come September, those payments will be over.
We don't want an Australian economy that's propped up by subsidies.
Also not included, the 490,000 people who dropped out of the labour force, not looking for work, so technically not unemployed.
The participation rate has fallen to 63.5%. The economic numbers will get worse before they get better.
The gradual easing of restrictions only helps so much too, with casual and part-time workers the only option for some businesses. Already last month, underemployment soared by 600,000 people to 13.7%, the highest rate on record.
It is very important that as the economy starts opening up again and as we start getting out from under this doona that we're under, that people do go back and start seeking those opportunities.
But how many opportunities will there be when we do finally throw off the covers?
We'll be joined by Deloitte economist Nikki Hutley to break down what this all means. Nikki, was this as bad as you thought it would be?
Well, yes and no, to equivocate. The fall in employment was, pretty much as expected, perhaps a little higher, 600,000 jobs lost in the month. But obviously the unemployment rate only rose to 6.2%, I say only in inverted commas, because nearly 500,000 people left the workforce altogether. So there's a whole load in these numbers that you need to strip behind that headline unemployment rate and have a look at things like underemployment, the hours worked, and the picture is pretty grim. But of course, we've had some data coming up before now that indicated this was what was to be expected.
And given that this number doesn't reflect the number of people on JobKeeper, is it really accurate?
Well, no, but it's very hard to know exactly how many people on JobKeeper might be actually unemployed, how many might be working reduced hours, and how many people might have actually been able to keep their job. But not everybody on JobKeeper would naturally lose their job. They might have just lost some more hours. So it's a bit murky to try and work this out. But the number that jumps out to me is 1 in 5 Australians are either unemployed or underemployed. That means they're not getting enough work. The hours worked fell by 10% in April. So there's some pretty scary numbers there.
Can I ask you about JobKeeper and specifically what it doesn't cover and when it might end? Anthony Albanese, the opposition leader, sort of started their line of attack on this today. This is what he said.
When we look at the JobKeeper program, the government is still leaving people behind, particularly the most vulnerable, our casual employees, people in whole sectors like the arts and entertainment sector.
Then there are other people in the government who say that it should be extended past September but narrowed, so it only focuses on like the tourism industry or something like that, those sort of hard-hit industries. As an economist, which of those sort of approaches would you take?
Yeah, look, I mean, in an ideal world, you'd say we're just going to keep going with those sectors, like hospitality, tourism, that are going to be hit for much longer. But in the real world, it's very, very hard to distinguish between, for example, a chef who works in a particular restaurant that needs 200 people to be able to have a go of it versus a chef that might work for a professional services company. So how do you distinguish between those? And it's one of the reasons the government implemented JobKeeper the way it did, was it was simple and easy to implement. Once you start fiddling, once you start saying, we'll have this person and not this person, then it becomes a lot harder.
Lots of doom and gloom here, Nikki. Are there any silver linings? Is there anything we can cling to?
Look, it is hard, and I feel like at the moment, you just wake up every day and there's a deluge of bad news coming at you. But what I cling to that keeps a bit of optimism for me is saying, well, how do we take what is a dire situation and think about what are the positives that come out of it? I think about, what's increased flexibility mean to get better female participation when we come out of this, better workforce flexibility for all sorts of people so that we have greater inclusion, greater diversity. How do we think about how we capture some of the savings that we've had in emissions because of people travelling less? How can we keep those going after COVID? So, you've got to mine the gems and try and hold on to those and say, what are the little positives that have come out and how can we hold on to those after this is all over? Because it will be over one day.
Nikki, as always, we appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.